This is Backstage Sonoma, your all-access pass to the local music scene.
Ooh, we're gonna have fun.
Yes.
Coming to you from beautiful downtown Santa Rosa, this is the Backstage Sonoma podcast. And now, here's your host, Steve Roby.
This is Backstage Sonoma, and I'm Steve Roby. Folk-inspired indie artist Marty O'Reilly is my guest today. His music is a captivating blend of folk, blues, and soul with a unique style that's both familiar and innovative. His lyrics are poetic and his voice is stunning, creating a sound that's entirely his own within the Americana genre. Marty will join me shortly to discuss his songwriting, new material, and an upcoming show in Healdsburg. But first, let's hear a taste of his music. Here's Marty O'Reilly with Cold Canary Gaslight.
Like a Bible and acts just like a bird cage, or it's like an engine dying out on burn rage. And you can blow out all the candles and fire up the limelight. She looks stoned with the cold canary gaslight. Oh, sister, now, don't you look at what I've done. Oh, sister, now, don't you look at what I've done. Father's at the front door, dusting off the floor mat, brittle like his thick bark, tired like his old hat. He used to wonder how a young boy travels to a grown man. Said he walked on water, he was dancing on quicksand.
Singer-songwriter Marty O'Reilly is my guest today. Welcome to Backstage Sonoma, Marty.
Thank you.
How did you get started as a musician? When did it all begin for you?
When I was a teenager, my parents randomly gave me a guitar for Christmas. They'd been trying to help me find my thing. And I tried a lot of things that didn't end up being my thing. And I had asked them for a guitar, I think maybe a year before or something, but I'd kind of forgotten about it. So I was surprised to find it on Christmas morning. And right away, I was obsessed. And I spent the next 2 months, I didn't even know how to play a single chord, so I would just kind of pretend to play it. I think I was 14 or 15. And it wasn't until a couple months later that I started taking lessons, and my best friend started teaching me to play the guitar.
Nice.
And around the same time, I was trying to illegally download an album by the Wu-Tang Clan off of Napster. And if you never use that software, the file wasn't always what it said that it was. It could be basically anything. But in this case, it wasn't the Wu-Tang Clan. It was a recording from Blind Willie Johnson from the early 1920s. My dad played a lot of good music around the house when I was growing up, and I'd heard stuff like that before. But I had kind of a moment there where I was like, "What is this?" And between that and the moment that I strummed my first guitar chord, I had two really full body experiences in those moments. And I just fell in love with old blues music, folk music, and gospel music. And I started exploring the catalog of that music and learning to play it at the same time.
That's interesting. Do you remember what kind of guitar you got, your first guitar?
I think my dad bought it from Gerard down at Sonoma Valley Music. And it was this semi-hollow, dark brown wood finish. It was a brand called Seville, which was interesting because they didn't even really make them anymore when I got it when I was a teenager, and you can barely kind of find them. It was on the internet. It's like a weird knockoff brand.
Huh.
but it was like a surprisingly good guitar. And that was it.
Who would you say are some of the musicians that have most influenced your sound and style?
I think one of the greatest strengths and joys of my musical endeavor, and also one of the biggest challenges and obstacles, is that I don't really like to stick in one corner as far as genres. So like when people ask me what kind of music I play, it's really hard to give them a short-winded answer. And the same kind of goes for my heroes and my influences. They're from kind of all over the place. Van Morrison, for sure. There was a lot of that in my household when I was growing up, and I loved it. Ray LaMontagne. There's a guy from Australia named C.W. Stone King, who's lesser known, but really excellent. And his music, his whole thing's kind of in character as a guy from like the early 20th century. And his music is inspired by blues music, swing music, New Orleans music, and also like Haitian music. He's a huge influence of mine. And then Jolie Holland, she was one of the Be Good Tanyas, and her first two albums were really huge for me. Tom Waits, Alan Wolf. There's this, I mean, I can go on and on. Nick Drake is another huge one. Nick Drake for sure.
Yeah. It's always interesting to see what's part of a musician's DNA when you ask them that question. That was fascinating.
Well, it's cool because I feel like I took little things from each of those artists, and they're all such cool artists. And the sum of having little seeds from all those different worlds, it's like really fun for me from a musical perspective.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about your songwriting process. Where do you find inspiration when you're putting a song together?
I'm an artist that struggles a lot with writer's block. I tend to have like really inspired phases and then really long dry spells. So I don't feel like I can answer this question with like, I have this thing that always works. But I think that's not that uncommon.
Yeah.
And because of that, I have different ways that I try to do things. If one tool isn't working, then I try another. But the main thing is, like, when I started playing music, it was interesting because I got really, really into like old Delta blues music first. And that kind of became my like teenage angst music in a way. It helped me with a lot of difficult emotions through a really difficult time. And I think that's important to start with and important to mention because I think the one thing that people don't talk about enough is that in this weird magical way, songwriting is something that you do for yourself first, or it should be. And that's what it was for me, and always has been, is like a medicine or a way to help me process feelings. So at the core, songwriting is first and foremost, I do it for myself. And then after the fact, you can invite people to share in that with you and hopes that they find joy in it or that it makes them feel good.
Yeah.
Secondly, earlier in my career, I kind of liked to write stories in my songs. And so, that's pretty common. Like I love a good story, and I love a way to turn it into a song. And something that I would do a lot is just be interested in a subject. And then I just start reading about it on Wikipedia. And strangely, I wrote a lot of really fun songs that way. A lot of times, there's just like a lot of stuff to chew on the Wikipedia page, interesting factoids, interesting stories. So I would do that a lot. Yeah, those are the main ways I say.
I appreciate you sharing that. Your team sent over some music to share with our listeners. What's the backstory for your song, Sleep Talking?
Sleep Talking is an interesting one. It was inspired by that moment in The Big Lebowski where he's like flying over the city, and I think The Man in Me by Bob Dylan is playing. And it's funny how songs can be the sum of two very disparate things. And I wrote that song during the pandemic. So I was thinking about that feeling and also the strangeness of being around so many people and still feeling a sense of being alone, not necessarily in a bad way. There's a little bit of the joy in like just getting home and being home by yourself, and how that can feel really good sometimes.
I know what you mean.
Yeah. So it's kind of about that. The protagonist of the song is sleep talking on the phone with the dial tone. I don't know why I decided to write about that, but I just thought it was funny.
Well, thanks for filling us in on the backstory of that song. Let's listen to it now. This is Marty O'Reilly with Sleep Talking here on Backstage Sonoma.
Keep talking, I'm listening, like a deer caught in your brights. This is where they go, on the highways at night, so far from the body, so near danger and the mundane, floating like the low-lying clouds, just above the terrain. I know I should come back down. The truth is that I can't complain. Lately I've been sleep talking with a stranger on the phone. Late night sipping something stiff, trying to hum the dial tone. Baby, it's easy when you're not the only one. Baby, it's easy. Never get anything done. I just can't shake it. The feeling when I get home. All day I've been so lonely. Now I'm finally alone. They'll never admit it. Maybe I'm a lot like you. We're just a couple of aliens undercover with nothing to do. People that make me feel human, so very far and so few. Lately I've been sleep talking with a stranger on the phone. Late night sipping something stiff, trying to hum the dial tone. Baby, it's easy when you're not the only one. Baby, it's easy. You never get anything done. Baby, it's easy when you're not the only one. People do it all the time and never get anything done. Baby, it's easy. Baby, it's easy. Baby, it's easy when you're not the only one.
Marty O'Reilly is our guest on Backstage Sonoma. Marty, I understand you're working on some new material. Can you share some info about the project and when can we look forward to it?
I would love the answer to that question myself. I have this new album that I'm working on.
Okay.
It's my first solo album, and I've been working on it slowly but consistently since like 2001. Basically, it was still sort of the pandemic, and you have to remember like how long it took the music industry to catch up. And a lot of people say it never did.
Right.
So there was a phase in my life where, historically, I've just been touring super hard my whole life. But this was a phase where I couldn't really do that. And also, I just had a baby. So I wrote a lot of the songs when we were in lockdown. I made this decision that rather than renting like a big fancy studio and having access to really all the best gear in this remote space, but like feeling the clock running while you're there, I thought maybe I should try doing this where in a way where I can take as much time as I need and really move at my own pace. So I have a friend named Jesse Adams who's from a Bay Area band called Royal Jelly Jive. He lived right on the other side of town in Sonoma. And for a couple of years, I just kind of drive over there after the baby went to sleep, put in a couple hours, and then my brain would shut off from being tired from dad duty. And then I just go home and I put in a couple hours on Tuesday, a couple hours on Friday. And then he'd stay up all night playing with it. He'd send me a mix at like 3 a.m. and then I'd be waking up with the baby at 3 a.m. And I'd listen to the mix and send him notes. So in this weird way, we had this like 24-hour cycle of constantly working. And now it's for the most part done. I'm in post-production,
okay.
finishing some mixing, finishing some mastering, working on the artwork.
Okay.
I would guess we'll start seeing it released before the end of the year.
All right. Do you have a working title?
I don't. That's one of the things holding me up. And I also have this idea, which I'm unsure about. This body of work is a combination, and this is kind of true for most of my albums, but like it's a combination of kind of heavier alternative rock, soul, indie rock kind of stuff, and like delicate, pretty folk music. When I started kind of seeing what I was creating in retrospect, I was like, I don't know if this all fits on the same body of work. So I had this idea that I would release it as 2 EPs rather than one full-length album.
Right.
For listeners that don't know, an EP is a shorter recorded release that's usually about 3 to 5 songs.
Right.
And the idea being that, but they go hand in hand. On a streaming service, you'd see them listed as 2 different 5-song EPs. But when I manufacture it on vinyl, they'll be on either side of the same vinyl record.
Nice. I like it.
Yeah, I think it's kind of fun.
Yeah.
So, but one of the things holding me up is like what to call it or what to call both of them, depending upon whether I do the 2 EPs or the full-length album.
Do you have like a first single in mind?
It's interesting because there's always this conversation of like, should I go with my favorite or should I go what I think everybody else's favorite will be? Or also in this era, we're like very beholden to the algorithmic mechanics of Spotify. And the way that works to my understanding is that it's not always best to release the strongest thing first. So there's just like a lot of moving parts that don't make it easy to make a decision about that.
How things have changed, eh?
Yeah.
Let's jump back into your current release called Signal Fires. And this track is called Jonestown. What can you tell our listeners about this song?
This is an interesting one. Town is definitely one of my darker works. I mentioned earlier that I like to write songs just reading the Wikipedia page about things. And many years ago, I had a bass player. His name's Ben. And Ben was reading a lot about Jonestown and listening to these tapes. There's like recording the tapes from Jonestown. And he was like, Marty, we should write a song about Jonestown. Just read the Wikipedia page. You can listen to these tapes. And I was like, okay, I'll give it a shot. And it didn't work. But I kept coming back to the idea every once in a while. And then it was 2016. And the political environment had me thinking a lot about cults. And all of a sudden, I had all these real life frustrations and emotions that kind of fit in that story. And it all just kind of fell out in like 10 minutes. And I really like the words on that one. They're really cool. It's interesting because like one of the things about being a musician that plays a lot of different kinds of music, there's sort of like a Venn diagram of different people that like it for different reasons. And that doesn't mean that everybody's going to like everything that you do. That's been really challenging for me. So some people just really like the delicate folk stuff I do and aren't really into the like heavy dark stuff. And some people are the other way around. So night by night, I kind of have to look at the demographic of the show and kind of figure out like what's going to work, what's not going to work. And for years, I stopped playing that song when the political environment shifted a little bit. But now I'm playing it again.
Wow.
I'm thinking about those things a lot again. I've been playing it at the last few shows and it's been really, really fun, like a highlight of the night.
I'm excited to play it. This is Marty O'Reilly with Jonestown here on Backstage Sonoma.
past the commotion, past all the history and the hiss of the tape. As you draw closer, like images in the fog, these voices and sounds, they begin to take shape. In Jonestown, how far am I from? Get back again, decades to forget. Word arrived in just days in Georgetown. How far am I from? And he past the commotion, past all the history and the hiss of the tape. As you draw closer, like images in the fog, his voices and sounds, they begin to take shape in Jonestown. How far am I from?
If you just tuned in, I'm speaking with musician Marty O'Reilly. Marty, you just mentioned a little while ago that your dad, congratulations. I was wondering, how do you balance everything while staying active in the music world?
It's really, really challenging. I know that's an obvious answer.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, I know a lot of musicians, some of them are having kids, and different musician families do it differently. And there's a lot of moving parts. Like what works for their family, what works for the temperament of their child. You know, a lot of people on the road are almost every show, people are like, bring your baby, bring your wife. And I would love that. I miss them every moment that I'm on the road, and I'm on the road a lot, playing 100 shows this year. But I also know from experience that like, that's not necessarily the best thing for my kid. And if it's not the best thing for my kid, it's probably not the best thing for my wife. And it's probably not the best thing for me either. I try to bring them with me when I know that the itinerary is relatively easy, where I know that I can make sure they're staying somewhere comfortable and safe, and that it's just not too ambitious of a journey. But that's not that frequent for me. Like, I work really hard on the road. I travel really hard. And so most of the time they're staying home when I'm gone.
Yeah.
And that presents a whole different set of obstacles that I'm talking a lot about with my wife and working on with my son right now, because he's almost 3. He's not a baby. I keep calling him. He's going to be a baby till he's 30 years old. But he's old enough that he's definitely like aware that I'm gone, and it causes some, you know, it's hard for him. But luckily now he also is beginning to understand more and more why I'm gone. And that really helps. But the long and the short of it is that like, it's a huge factor in designing my tour schedule of how it's going to work for him. I try not to be gone too long anytime. So generally I do a lot of what's called pocket touring, where instead of getting in a van and driving around the country in a big circle for 3 months, I fly out to different parts of the country. I rent a car. I tour. I do about 9 shows in 10 days or something. And then I fly right home. And I usually do that about once a month. A lot of time I'm somewhere in the country driving around doing shows. And then I come home and I get to be kind of a stay-at-home dad, which I really
nice.
Love.
That's a wonderful story. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Some of the reviews I read online say your live performances are transformative. What inspires you to bring that energy and emotion to every show?
This kind of goes back to the songwriting thing about songwriting. I remember hearing this clip. It was like on social media somewhere where someone's asking, they're like in a university class and they're asking the professor some sort of musical question. I forget, but his answer is that, and they're talking about jazz, but he says the musician is the first listener. And like, I think that's a really important concept and quote. It kind of goes back to songwriting for yourself first. Is like, if you're not doing something that matters to you, whether from a songwriting perspective or a musical performance perspective, how can you expect it to mean anything to anybody else unless you're just able to convince them somehow? The same thing goes for me with live performances, is that I got to make sure that something happens that is really fun for me, that feels really good for me, that feels really real for me. If I can't do it in a way that's exciting, I have no business doing it. And every night when I play a show, my goal is to work into a headspace where I am feeling as good as possible and having as much fun as possible. And what I've learned over time is that if you leave the door open, people can come with you. You know, you could sort of invite them in.
Right.
And in that way, it's really sort of a shared experience. I'm also a big fan of like breaking down the wall between the artist and the audience, which is hard when you have a big stage or something and you're, 10 feet in the air above everybody. But I'm really trying to push back against that to make it feel like we're all just in a room hanging out, doing something all together. And there's the way you think about that in your mind when you're playing music, the way you talk with the audience. I'm trying to make it a shared, joyful experience as much as possible.
Yeah. I think that's so important too, especially when a performer makes eye contact with the audience and it isn't just looking down and you really feel part of the show too.
I often have my eyes very tightly closed because I'm focusing on, but in those moments, like maybe it's a moment where, because I'm working pretty hard the whole time, I'm kind of like pushing myself the whole time. But then I find those moments where I'm like, okay, I know what to do in this part. This part's easy. My job is to be in the background for a second. And then I try and really take those moments to kind of open my eyes and connect people. And also, like, part of my job is to gauge how people are doing, you know, whether it's just to observe what the collective feeling is in the room and make sure that it's working and pivot if it's not.
Well, let's talk about your upcoming show in Healdsburg, beautiful Healdsburg. What can fans look forward to at your upcoming show?
It's at Little Saint. And if you haven't been to Little Saint, it's a pretty amazing spot. Every time I walk in there, I kind of feel like I'm in like Casablanca or something. Really good food, really good wine, really beautiful space, really good sound, just the right size room. Like, they're kind of doing everything right. And it's a free show. And it's been interesting because I hadn't had a gig in Healdsburg in a long time, but they do this special free show thing on Thursdays, and they take care of me. And when I got there, they were like, "This is the busiest Thursday we've ever had." And I was like, it's kind of been the case every time. So people are excited to go to that space to hang out with me. And it kind of feels like it's an annual thing now that everybody's kind of looking forward to. So if you're planning on coming, I forget whether they take reservations, whatever, but like, don't just show up and assume that you're going to have a seat. I would call them or get there early and check it out because it gets packed in there.
Good idea. And let me remind our listeners, Marty O'Reilly will perform a free show at Little Saint in Healdsburg on Thursday, August 29th. The show starts at 6 p.m. And for more information, go to littlesainthealdsburg.com. And to hear more of Marty's music and see his tour schedule, go to martyoreilly.com. Hey, Marty, thanks for your time today. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, me too. And if I can shout out one more show, I have a big show that I'm doing. I know it's early to talk about it, but, I live in downtown Sonoma, and I grew up performing on the stage at the Sebastiani Theater. And I'm going to do a big show there on New Year's Eve. I did it last year. It was a blast. I got a brass band. We did a second line parade around the plaza. We all had so much fun. I partnered with my buddies at Winery 16600, and everybody had so much fun that on New Year's Day, every party was like, let's do that again. So if you can't make it to Little Saint, come to, and you don't have New Year's Eve plans, come join me in Sonoma on New Year's Eve at the Sebastian.
When do tickets go on sale for that?
I don't even know. Probably soon, but just don't make other plans.
Okay. So the best advice is go to martyoreilly.com, look at your tour schedule, and keep an eye out for that New Year's Eve show. Okay, Marty, thank you for your time today. Appreciate it.
Thank you. This was fun.
Backstage Sonoma will be right back after this quick break.
Hey musicians, would you like to be a guest and promote your upcoming concert and latest release? It's easy. Just email the host at backstagesonoma@gmail.com. Now, let's get back to the show.
Thanks for listening to the Backstage Sonoma podcast. Join us next time for more great interviews and music from local and touring musicians. You can find us on the web at backstagesonoma.com.